I find that a sort of a very useful, helpful framework to think about, what is sort of a good candidate for us to try to apply something like ChatGPT to? What is a good problem? What kind of characteristic does it have for it to be a good match for us to use this technology? One way to think about it is when you're generating content, right? When you're writing something, a blog post, a marketing copy, an e-commerce product description, or a sales email, things of that sort. You have to ask yourself, what is cheaper for me? Is it cheaper for me to have something like ChatGPT write the first draft, and then I merely go in and check for errors and make sure it's correct and it matches the tone of my brand and things like that, and send it off, versus creating it from scratch, right? That's sort of the first question. Is it much less expensive, effort-wise, to have it draft and you correct it, versus you creating the whole thing in the first place? That's the first thing. The second part of it is, if despite my correcting and fixing the output, it does make a mistake that I don't catch and it goes out into the outside world, can I live with the mess? Can I live with the consequences? So they are both very important considerations. And so if you have an application which satisfies considerations, then I think it's actually good to go forth and do an experiment and do a pilot project to see whether these technologies can actually help you with that particular task. Now, stepping back and asking what kinds of tasks are people finding that actually fits into this framework, I guess maybe the one that's the most mature is really using these tools to help with software development. So programmers worldwide, many of them have actually adopted the use of these tools to actually write software. Because you have to remember that ChatGPT and large language models are text in, text out, right? And a program is just text out. So you can go from English text in to Python text out, as well as you can go from English to English or English to German. There are lots of tools out there which actually help you basically write code using these technologies. So for example, let's say that you want to write a program. I'll just give a simple example for illustration. You want to write a program to sort 100 numbers from highest to lowest. Of course, you can use well-known functions for it, but you can actually simply write in English. Say, okay, write me a Python program to sort numbers from high to low, and it'll actually give you the code for it. I'm obviously giving a super simple example, but you can actually ask it much more complicated things to do and it'll actually do it for you, right? So here is a classic case where it's probably going to take you maybe 30 minutes to write the program, but this thing will give it to you in literally 30 seconds. But as I mentioned earlier, you have to check the output and make sure it's correct. So you want to take that program and make sure it actually, in fact, does the job you want it to do. But that is actually not hard to do, because as in software development, we already have the ability to take any piece of code and test it and make sure it does what it's supposed to do, right? Even when a human writes a piece of software, we have to test it to make sure there are no bugs in it, that it actually works correctly. So we already have the infrastructure for testing and verifying, which is why this is a beautiful sweet spot where it's much cheaper to have the technology write code for you, because you can very quickly check and verify it anyway. So this, being able to program using these technologies has been, I have seen reports saying that there's a 30, 40, 50% productivity jump by using these tools for software development. So I think that maybe that's the most mature application of these technologies. Second, I would say, is content generation. I already talked about the ability to write blog posts and marketing and sales and product descriptions and so on and so forth. A lot of companies are experimenting with that because, again, it's much cheaper to fix ChatGPT's draft than for you to write the whole thing in the first place. However, we are very careful to make sure there is a human in the loop, right? In some sense, in this future world, amazing world of artificial intelligence, all of us are going to be doing quality assurance all the time, right? It's going to create and we're going to check it. So they have a human in the loop and they're using it and piloting these kinds of content generation applications. And then the final example I would point out is very often, people have questions about something and the answer is buried in hundreds of documents, particularly within an enterprise setting. And so you can obviously search through these documents using traditional search, but using these technologies, you can have a conversational search experience and you can ask a question, it's going to give you an answer. You can ask a follow-on question, it's going to remember what you asked earlier because it's a chatbot, it can give you an answer back. So it's actually a great use case, but remember again, it will occasionally make things up, it will actually get the facts wrong, so you have to be sort of vigilant to make sure that in fact the answer it gives you is true and relevant. But because you can ask it to cite its sources, you can say, whatever you find from me, please tell me the original source document that it came from. You can now go to the source and check for yourself that it's actually accurate. So instead of searching for something and not being sure if it's correct, now you can get something and then you can very quickly check if it's accurate. So this sort of question answer chatbot sort of applications people are experimenting with as well. But typically, because of the fact that these systems can create output that's problematic, they're using it sort of internally for the moment. For the most part, they're using it so employees can ask questions and get answers from a whole bunch of documents which are in the sort of the company intranet. In terms of chatbots for external customers to use, there are a few implementations I've heard of, but I think those are very early days. And there, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the risk of the chatbot saying something wrong to the customer, who then proceeds to act on it, right, and then suffers adverse consequences, is a real risk. So we have to be very careful about that. So I think those rollouts are much more cautious and slow. But the use of chatbots for internal question answering, I've seen many examples of that already.